It was 85, 90, 95 degrees every single day. How many times did this thing overheat?
In preparation for departure, please check your seatbelt and security fob. Your tabletop.
Oh man, I love Ireland. You guys are beautiful people. I get a lot of folks from Ireland.
Hello from New York City. We're going to see, can this camera, which is the Sony ZV-E1, just do as a travel camera with just one lens. And I'm already kind of struggling.
It's big.
It's big. First impression in New York. First impression in New York. Other impression in New York. This camera is too big, but not as big as what we're in. Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Oh my God. This, we gotta talk. Let's start with the bad. This is obviously a full frame camera, is the Sony ZV-E1. This is the Viltrox 16mm lens. This is the only lens I brought with me to New York City. It's an amazing lens. However, it is quite big. It's a big lens. It does add a little bit of weight compared to something like an APS-C lens, which is a lot smaller. Or even if you compare the two, which is, for a lot of folks, the little Sony ZV-E1. Yeah, I did find this was a little bit cumbersome to be taking it in and out of the bag, the backpack all the time. What I did do was buy a sling bag. This is the Nomadic Peter McKinnon sling bag. It was the bare bones of like $200, expensive add-on to this, but it changed the game because it was down by my side. I was able to pull this in and out easily enough, although that still came off every now and then. Here's where it kind of gets a little bit tricky. For us, this was a family holiday. Now, if you've looked at the video I made last year for a family holiday, I didn't take the camera out at all. In fact, the video I made, I shot at the very last day because I was trying to concentrate on being a family holiday. So for me, I kind of broke my own rule, and as much as I shot stuff with this, I really had a narrative in mind that I was going to make when I came home versus trying to shoot everything in New York City. I had an idea that the video you're watching now, this is the way it was going to go. There's a lot more oomph in this camera than, say, something like the Sony ZV-1 or any other kind of small travel camera that you might have, or your phone. If I wasn't traveling with family, this would have been absolutely perfect because you get the best out of everything. So when you're trying to juggle a bigger camera, it's not huge, but a bigger camera, it can be a kind of a thing with the kids. And I guess they were a little bit disappointed that I did bring the camera, but then once they saw what I was doing, which was just what you've seen, wasn't the end of the world, but having this was just an extra bit of a distraction to kind of work with. Now, speaking of working with this camera, if you have no idea what you're doing when it comes to what you're going to actually shoot, then that's obviously a very, very bad thing. So you really do have to have some kind of a shot list set up. And the only way you do that is with experience. So whether that's a medium shot, a wide angle shot, telephoto zoomed in shot. That's one thing, but that's the bad thing about this lens. And it's probably the only bad thing I could say, really, because this is one of my favorite lenses of 2023. The Viltrox 16mm 1.8 lens is a very, very wide lens. And you are really restricted in what you can shoot. So if you look at all of the footage that I have, it's all very, very wide. Yes, you can use their clear image zoom, which is really clean, and it's not like a crappy digital zoom. That worked, but that was kind of it. And then with the exception of being able to crop in within 4K shooting, which was the other thing that you had to do in post, you really were restricted to kind of 3 angles. Now, that's my bad, but again, this was a family holiday where I didn't want to be bringing 3 or 4 lenses, and then where everybody is like, okay, what do we do now? Well, I just gotta change the lens, son. Hand me that telephoto, daughter. Wife, where is the camera bag? That's the other thing that you really have to weigh up. Is there any good parts to the Sony ZV-E1?
Put the place up. Put my face up.
All of the time lapses that were done within the Sony ZV-E1, as a rule, for a long time, I used to always take the intervalometer and you'd take like all photos, and you'd put together in post-production, and you'd edit them in Lightroom and copy the one setting, and long process, purist. But I was like, okay, let's just try out the video mode. So you flick the switch into S&Q mode. You have an option for time-lapse movies or slow-mo movies. Boom, straight into time-lapse. I had it pre-set up before we left. That was just like a minute or two, depending on what I wanted. And that was kind of it. Just put the camera down and press record. Boom. And then within the camera, you have the actual movie dedicated time-lapse. No post-production. Yes, you can grade it a little bit if you want. But that was it. That was just boom. It was there. It was done. And the first time I did it, I was like, oh, that's really easy. And I looked at the results that night and I'm like, it's pretty damn good. And then from there on in, every time I just wanted to take a time lapse, it was probably easier to take a time lapse with this than it is on my iPhone 14 Pro, which is a dedicated time lapse mode. Now, speaking of the S&Q mode, that switch, I did shoot an absolute ton of slow motion footage, predominantly 4K 120, again with the wide angle lens. I just wanted to be able to crop in a little bit in post if I needed to. Now, here's the thing. Used S&Q mode for this. I generally, as a rule, have never liked using S&Q mode, but this means that I didn't have to slow it down in post-production. The file came off the camera, completely slowed down to 4K 120 or whatever the setting that you would have it set up previously, and that was it. All right, boom, it was done. Really simple. Now, the downside of using 4K 120 on the S&Q mode is you just don't get audio. But I guess for the best part, if you are shooting slow motion at 120 frames per second, you don't want the audio anyway. When it came to shooting 4K 24, that's what I was shooting. Yes, the ND filter helps with the motion blur. I'm not sure many of you really care about that, but being a slight purist, I did. So I shot everything manually, and the way the Sony ZV-E1 is set up, just even right out of the box, you can change your shutter speed, you can do this, you can change your aperture, boom, 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 boom. Work really, really quickly. And the footage speaks for itself. The other thing that you really want to know, this thing, 4K 120, time lapse is constantly on. How many times did this thing overheat? We were in New York City. It was 85, 90, 95 degrees every single day. Yes, we were in air-conned environments now and again. Not as much as I would have liked, but every time we were out anywhere, this thing did not overheat once. I did not get the temperature warning icon thing that comes on the screen when it's about to melt. That didn't even come on. And this is like high humidity. This thing was absolutely faultless. The bulk of the footage I shot was actually all 4K 120 in S&Q mode. I was expecting this at some point to melt. Nope. Did it feel warm to the touch? Nope. But would I take this on vacation or holidays again? One of the sole reasons I bought this is to be able to take it out because it's the same sensor as the Sony FX3, but it's a lot cheaper than the Sony FX3. It's roughly half the price. It's still very expensive, but probably slightly less of a bitter pill to swallow if this got robbed or smashed or whatever versus the Sony FX3. But yeah, I mean, my overall conclusion is I may not. It depends completely what you're doing. I don't think this is perfect for like a family holiday because there's a lot of moving parts. It is a big camera. It does require your attention. You do need, I would recommend possibly a sling bag. Let me know in the comments below if you want to see more about this Peter McKinnon sling bag because I'm actually really, really impressed, even though it is quite expensive. But this thing, yeah. Other than that though, I mean, these are my shortcomings, not necessarily the camera's shortcomings. But think about this. How many of you would be willing to dial in the settings possibly each time? How many people would be willing to bring a whole bunch of lenses with wives or boyfriends or husbands or kids or pets when it's a week-long trip of a lifetime family holiday? That's the other thing that I think that's really, really important. What's also really important though is that you understand the settings on the Sony ZV-E1, and this video here will absolutely make you an expert. See you on the next vid.